To China now, where the embattled property developer Evergrande has filed for bankruptcy protection in the US. This while another developer, Country Garden, has missed 2 bond payments and could be headed for default in the coming weeks. Well, the country's massive property sector has suffered enormously in recent years, with regulations limiting debt and a failure to deliver homes, leading to buyers stopping paying their mortgages. Well, for more on this story, we can bring in Diane Liang, author and professor at Tepper School of Business at Carnegie Mellon University. Thank you very much for joining us, Diane. It's a pretty spectacular downfall of China's property sector, which once had quite a promising outlook. Where did it all go wrong?
Well, this downturn started actually before the pandemic. It's taken some time, but I can't say anyone is surprised because China's real estate property market, it accounts for 30% of Chinese GDP, is exceptionally large. And the home ownership is 90% among Chinese population, which is again exceptionally high. And this coupled with very overheating market for almost 40 years. The government had tried to cool the market down since before the pandemic with different policies, such as restricting land sales to developers, which then in turn led to a downturn and coupled with huge indebtedness of the developers such as Evergrande, Country Garden. Evergrande is the world's largest indebted developer and has unpaid bills top $30 billion. And so these becomes a sort of perfect storm for China. And now it's creating a huge crisis, not only in property values, but also in the debt crisis among the developers as well as homeowners. And so this is what's happening in China. And it's a major crisis. And the government is trying to create stimulus measures. However, given that this is one of the biggest bubbles in the world, possibly, and the government's toolkit is very much empty, and they don't want to create another, soaring market just to keep the economy going. So we're looking at something quite extraordinary at the moment.
And is there a contagion risk from all this? I mean, the possibility that the crisis could spill into other industries in China?
Absolutely. We are already seeing the contagion happening in China. China's recovery from the pandemic has been slow, partially due to low consumer consumption. The Chinese population's wealth is very much tied to their property ownership and property values. So the Chinese consumers at the moment are nervous and they are not spending enough and they are saving. And as we've seen, and there are also shadow banking crises where people can get their money and shadow banks are going bankrupt and default on their payments. And so all this creates a very uncertain psychological situation for the Chinese consumers. And we see that impacting Chinese recovery in addition to the real estate market and real estate industry being on a verge of major crisis.
So you talked about anxiety spreading through Chinese consumers there, but the anxiety from the crisis is spreading through global markets as well. Does the world economy have something to fear at this point or in the future?
Given China is the second largest economy, anything happen in China, especially at this scale, will have major consequences for the world economy. And for example, Evergrande filed bankruptcy in New York because the company cannot pay overseas debt. And the amount of debt they owe to overseas bondholders and investors is huge. And next week, the week after, we could see Country Garden and also going bankrupt or default on their payment. All these have huge implications. In addition to that, we're looking at the moment, Chinese real estate market is very much in crisis, contained within the private developer market segment. But that contagion is happening. The state developers are already warning that they will be affected as well. And when that happens, the Chinese domestic debt bondholders, debt holders will be affected. That will create an even bigger wave of crisis. So all these have major implications, not only to China, but also beyond the Chinese border to the global markets and global investors.
All right, Professor Diane Liang from Carnegie Mellon University, thank you very much for your analysis and for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.